My mom chose her high school rival's son over me, calling him the child she always wanted, and after they mocked my college dreams, I decided to disappear. What happened next left them begging for me back. Last night, I had a phone call I never thought I would get, my dad's shaky voice on the line, asking me if I could ever forgive him. It's been almost 7 years since I left home without saying goodbye. 7 years since my mother told me, in front of the boy she wished was her son, that I wasn't the daughter she wanted. I grew up in a small town in Vermont, the kind of place where everyone pretends to mind their own business but knows who's dating who, whose car broke down, and who bought new curtains. My parents, Candace and Raymond, were what you might call old school, quiet lives, steady jobs, big expectations. I was their only child. I didn't play sports, didn't care much for school dances. Instead, I loved sketching old barns, dreaming about studying architecture, and getting out of that tiny town one day. When I was 15, my mother reconnected with her old high school nemesis, Margot DeWitt, through Facebook. Margot, by all accounts, had made it, successful real estate agent in Boston, glamorous vacations, even had her son Holden, who somehow seemed to have inherited all of Margot's social ambition and then some. It started with casual comments. Margot's son Holden just won a regional debate competition. Isn't that impressive? My mom would say while glancing at my sketchbook with mild disgust. Then he started visiting. At first, it was just for a weekend here and there. Then it became a holiday. I'll never forget the first time he stayed with us for Thanksgiving. Mom pulled out the good plates she never even used for my birthdays, and made 3 different kinds of pie. Holden sat at the head of the table like he owned the house, telling stories about his elite private school friends and how he was destined for Yale. I sat there, pushing cranberries around my plate, while my mom beamed at him like he had personally delivered her a winning lottery ticket. Every time I tried to talk about my college dreams, about applying to RISD, about saving up for tuition, it was met with barely concealed boredom. One night, after I showed her a portfolio I was working on for a summer program, she barely glanced up before muttering, "Maybe if you had half of Holden's drive, you'd actually go somewhere." I said nothing. I packed up my drawings and went to my room. When Holden graduated high school, my parents threw him a huge barbecue. I wasn't even asked if I wanted to invite anyone. That day, my mom called Holden the child I always wanted, half jokingly, she said, but it didn't feel like a joke when her eyes softened in a way they never did with me. I overheard her say it to Margot when they were sipping sangria on the back porch. I heard every word. Still, I kept working. Keep dreaming. I wasn't going to let bitterness swallow me. Senior year came, and I got my acceptance letter to RISD, full of excitement and possibility. I walked into the living room clutching it, my heart hammering. Holden was there, again. He was lounging on the couch, playing some shooting game. My mom was painting her nails. I got in, I said, my voice louder than I meant. Holden smirked without even pausing the game. Art school? Cute. My mother laughed. Actually, I laughed. Well, not everyone can be Ivy League material, she said lightly, tossing the nail polish brush back into the bottle. The moment stuck to me like a burr. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply walked upstairs, packed a duffel bag with the essentials, clothes, sketchbook, laptop, and left through the back door without saying goodbye. I didn't have a full plan. I just knew I wasn't staying. I used some savings from a part-time job and got a one-way bus ticket to Providence. The next few years were cruel. I rented a tiny apartment above a pawn shop. The floorboards sagged, and the heat barely worked, but it was mine. I took every side job I could, waitressing, dog walking, sketching portraits at tourist spots on weekends. Anything to keep the lights on. RISD was harder than anything I'd ever done. Sometimes I worked until 3 a.m., fingers stiff from drafting assignments, eyes burning from lack of sleep. I skipped meals. I skipped parties. I cried in the studio bathroom more than once. But I made it. Professors started noticing my work. I won a small grant. then an internship, then a paid fellowship. When I graduated, I had offers, real ones, from firms in New York and San Francisco. Meanwhile, my phone filled with voicemails. At first, my mom's messages were syrupy sweet. "We just want to hear from you, sweetheart." Then came the guilt trips. "After everything we've done for you, you can't even return a call?" Then anger. "You're so ungrateful. Just like your father said you'd be." I didn't answer any of them. I didn't owe them anything. I moved to San Francisco, took a studio apartment with a view of the bay, adopted a mutt named Miso, and built a life that had nothing to do with Vermont. Years passed. I got promoted. I traveled. I sent postcards to friends but never to my parents. Until last week. It was a rainy Saturday when my phone rang. An unknown Vermont number. Against every instinct, I answered. It was my dad. His voice was thin, reedy. He sounded older. Smaller. He told me that Holden had wrecked their car while driving drunk. That my mom had had a minor stroke 6 months ago. That they were draining their savings bailing Holden out of mess after mess. He asked, quietly, almost whispering, if I would ever consider coming home. He said, "Your mother knows she was wrong." I didn't know how to respond. I sat there, staring out the window, Miso curled at my feet, feeling both everything and nothing all at once. They needed me now. They were sorry now. But where were they when I needed them? When I was scared and alone in a freezing studio apartment, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life by leaving? I don't know what to do. They are my parents. But I built a life without them. Part of me feels like visiting just to get closure. Part of me feels like keeping the door closed forever. If you made it this far, thank you. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if people really change. And if I even owe them another chance. I didn't rush to book a ticket. I let the call sit inside me for a few days, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. Every morning I walked past Miso's leash hanging by the door, past the windows where the fog rolled in over the bay, and tried to imagine Vermont. The creaky old house, the peeling paint, the kitchen that always smelled faintly of pine sol and disappointment. I wondered what it looked like now. Were the good plates still in the cabinet, gathering dust? Were my old drawings still shoved in the attic somewhere? Had they boxed me away the same way they boxed away their mistakes? One evening after work, I sat on my couch, staring at a blank TV screen, and finally texted Raymond back. I'll come visit for a weekend. That's all I can promise. The reply came almost instantly. Raymond, thank you. No pressure. No guilt. Just those 2 words. I booked a flight for the following Friday. 1 duffel bag. No gifts. No promises. Just me, stepping back into a world I'd sworn I would never set foot in again. The plane ride was short but felt endless. My stomach twisted the whole way. As we descended into Burlington, I saw the green fields stitched together by crumbling stone fences, the houses spaced far apart like awkward strangers. It looked the same. And it didn't. Raymond was waiting for me in the pickup truck. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked thinner. Smaller. His beard was grayer than I remembered. He smiled when he saw me. It wasn't a big, sweeping grin. It was small. Tired. Grateful. "Hey, kiddo," he said, voice rough. "Hey, Dad," I said. He didn't try to hug me. I was grateful for that. The drive home was mostly silent. Just the crackle of gravel under tires, the low hum of the radio playing some country station we used to listen to when I was a kid. I kept waiting for him to bring it up, the past, the apology, the mess, but he didn't. When we pulled into the driveway, I felt a strange pang. The house looked sad. The shutters were hanging crookedly. The garden was overrun with weeds. The mailbox was duct taped. I followed Raymond up the steps, feeling like I was walking into a museum of a life that had crumbled without me. Inside, everything was familiar and exhausted. The carpet was stained. The kitchen smelled like old onions and mildew. Candace was sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a mug like it was the only thing anchoring her to the planet. She looked up when I entered. Her face crumpled. She stood up shakily. "Alyssa," she whispered. I stayed by the door. I didn't move toward her. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the mother who hadn't wanted me, and the daughter who had learned to live without her. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of an old cardigan. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice cracking. I was so wrong." I said nothing. She took a few halting steps toward me but didn't touch me. Maybe she could see it on my face, the invisible wall between us. She pulled out a chair. "Please," she said. "Sit. Let me explain." I sat. Not because I wanted to hear it, but because I needed to. Candace poured everything out like a dam had broken inside her. How after I left, she thought Holden would fill the hole. How Margot eventually cut off contact when it became clear Holden was nothing but a taker. How Holden spiraled, partying, scamming, drinking. How Candace had poured money and time into saving him until there was nothing left to give. How she realized, far too late, that she had pushed away the only child who had ever truly loved her. She wept openly. Her hands trembled. I thought chasing perfection would make me happy," she said. But all it did was destroy everything that mattered. Raymond sat silently across from her, shoulders hunched like he was carrying 100 invisible bricks. I listened. But listening wasn't the same as forgetting. I thought about the winters I spent shivering in that Providence studio apartment, wondering if I would ever be good enough. The birthdays I spent alone. The nights I fell asleep to the sound of Miso's soft breathing, pretending it didn't matter that no one called. I thought about the look on Candace's face when she laughed at my college acceptance. How small she made me feel. How invisible. Finally, I cleared my throat. "I'm glad you realized it," I said, my voice steady. "But realizing it doesn't erase it." Candace nodded, tears still slipping down her cheeks. "I know," she whispered. "I know." Raymond reached across the table and squeezed my hand, just for a second. No words. It didn't fix anything. But it was something. We spent the rest of the evening in an awkward, fragile truce. Candace made spaghetti, the only thing she still seemed confident cooking. She kept glancing at me like she was afraid I would disappear if she blinked. Raymond told old stories about the town, about who was still around, about the new bakery that had opened where the old hardware store used to be. It almost felt normal. Almost. But under it all, there was a river of things unsaid. Regret. Guilt. Distance. I slept in my old room that night. The walls were bare now, my posters long gone, the paint fading. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like a visitor in my own life. Part of me wondered why I had come. Part of me knew. Sometimes you have to face the ruins to truly move on. I woke up early the next morning, even though I barely slept. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of the kitchen clock downstairs. I patted down the creaky hallway, Miso's photo tucked safely in my wallet, still feeling half like a ghost walking through a memory. Candace was already in the kitchen, moving slowly between the coffee pot and the fridge like she wasn't sure what to do with herself. When she saw me, she straightened like a kid getting caught sneaking candy. "Morning," she said, voice too bright, too forced. "Morning," I answered, sitting down at the table. She poured me a cup of coffee without asking. I noticed her hands shaking slightly. We sat there in silence for a few minutes. "I was thinking," she said suddenly, her words rushing out like they'd been dammed up all night, "maybe you and I could go into town later? They opened a new art gallery downtown. Thought you might want to see it." She looked so hopeful it almost hurt. I sipped the coffee slowly. It was bitter, slightly burnt. The way she used to make it when I was little. Maybe, I said finally. Her face lit up, and for a second, I saw a glimpse of the mother I used to wish I had. Raymond came downstairs a few minutes later, yawning, scratching the back of his head. He smiled when he saw me, a real smile this time, soft, tired, but genuine. We ate breakfast in that awkward half-familiar way, like people who used to know each other but had forgotten the little rhythms. Afterward, Candace insisted on driving us into town. The main street looked almost the same, the bookstore still stood on the corner, the same ancient barber pole still spinning lazily next to the barber shop. But new shops had popped up too, a fancy cafe where the old diner used to be, a little artisan bakery smelling of fresh bread and cinnamon. We walked slowly, stopping to look at storefronts. Candace kept pointing things out, trying so hard it almost made me want to scream. At one point, we passed a group of teenagers huddled around their phones, laughing, and for a second, I felt that old pang. The feeling of being small, overlooked, invisible. Candace caught me looking and said, almost apologetically, I missed a lot, didn't I? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The new art gallery was small but beautiful. Local artists, rustic landscapes, abstract sculptures made from salvaged barn wood. I wandered quietly, letting the paintings pull me away from the awkwardness. Candace followed a few steps behind, not pushing, just there. After a while, she sat down on a bench near the entrance, giving me space. I appreciated that more than anything else she could have said. When we got home that afternoon, the sun was starting to set behind the trees. I thought maybe, just maybe, things could stay calm. I was wrong. Around 6, there was a knock at the door. Raymond answered, and I heard low voices in the entryway. When I peeked around the corner, my stomach twisted. It was Holden. He looked bad. Gone was the shiny, charming golden boy. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled and stained. He smelled faintly of cigarettes and something sour underneath. Alyssa, he said, grinning like nothing was wrong, like we were old friends. Long time no see. I didn't say anything. Just stared at him. Holden swaggered into the kitchen without being invited, grabbing a beer from the fridge like he still owned the place. Candace stood frozen, her face going pale. Raymond looked at me, apology written all over his face. Apparently, Holden had heard I was visiting. Somehow. And he had come to catch up. He slouched into a chair at the table, cracking open the beer with one hand. So, he said, smirking. You're still doing that art thing, huh? I didn't answer. Holden chuckled like I'd just confirmed something for him. You know, my mom always said you'd burn out, he said, taking a swig. Guess it's cute that you're still trying. Candace flinched visibly. Holden, she said sharply. That's enough. He waved her off. Relax. It's just a joke. You people are so sensitive. I stood up slowly, my hands steady. I'm not here to play games, I said quietly. You can leave. Holden laughed, a dry, ugly sound. Oh, come on. What, you think you're better than us now? You think a fancy city job makes you somebody? I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I picked up my duffel bag from the hallway, slung it over my shoulder, and walked toward the door. Raymond tried to block Holden from following me, but Holden just laughed again and yelled after me, Go ahead. Run away like you always do. I didn't turn around. The cool Vermont evening wrapped around me as I stepped outside, crisp and sharp like a blade. I walked down the driveway toward the road, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Behind me, I could hear Candace yelling at Holden, her voice cracking with something that sounded an awful lot like rage and regret. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew how this story went. I didn't stop walking until I reached the edge of town. There was an old bench near the library where I used to sit when I needed to think, back when I was just a kid with a sketchbook full of dreams. I sat down, breathing in the cool, pine-scented air, and pulled out my phone. There were already 3 missed calls from Raymond. One text from Candace, saying simply, "Please come back." I'm sorry. For the first time in years, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I thought about going back to San Francisco that night. I could catch a late bus, get a motel room near the airport, leave Vermont in the dust all over again. But part of me wasn't done yet. Part of me needed them to understand, truly understand, what it meant to lose me. Not just lose my presence. Losing my future. Lose the version of me that had quietly hoped for their approval for years. I stood up, feeling a calm determination settle into my bones. The next morning, I returned to the house. Raymond answered the door, relief flooding his face. Candace was sitting on the couch, looking smaller than ever. Holden was nowhere to be seen, maybe licking his wounds somewhere else. I sat down across from them, letting the silence stretch until it felt unbearable. Then I spoke. "I need you to hear something," I said, voice steady. "And I need you not to interrupt." They both nodded quickly. "You didn't just hurt me when you chose Holden over me," I said. "You taught me that love in this house was conditional. That approval had to be earned, bought, begged for." Candace's mouth trembled. She opened it, then closed it. "You didn't break me," I continued. "But you broke whatever future we could have had together." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, my portfolio. I laid it on the coffee table, slowly, carefully. Inside were prints of my projects, award-winning designs featured in national magazines. Photos from exhibitions I had curated. Letters of recommendation from some of the top architects on the West Coast. My offer letter to become a junior partner at a major firm, something unheard of for someone my age. I watched their faces as they flipped through the pages. Shock. Awe. And then, slowly, devastation. They realized exactly what they had missed out on. Not just birthdays and phone calls. But pride. Joy. The honor of saying, "That's my daughter." "You wanted a perfect child," I said quietly. "You had one. You just didn't see it." Candace burst into tears, deep, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Raymond just covered his face with his hands. I felt lighter. I stood up, tucked the folder back into my bag, and slung it over my shoulder. "I wish you well," I said. "I really do. But I'm done chasing after people who only love the idea of me, not the real me." I walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned back one last time. "I hope someday you find peace," I said. "But it won't be through me." Then I walked out into the morning sunlight, letting the door click softly behind me. Back in San Francisco, life continued. I moved into a bigger apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. I adopted a second dog, a goofy golden retriever who loved stealing Miso's toys. I traveled. I laughed. I loved it. Every so often, a letter would arrive from Vermont. Sometimes from Candace, filled with apologies and updates about her health. Sometimes from Raymond, short notes saying he was proud of me. I read them. I even smiled sometimes. But I never wrote back. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was living well. It was becoming the woman they couldn't even imagine, strong, unbreakable, free. And that, in the end, was enough. More than enough.